Okay, everyone, welcome back to Frames of Reference. It's Sensing Nostalgia Differently with Research and Creation. And this is our second panel brought to us today by the Nostagain Network. Panel 2 is Nostalgia, the Sixth Sense. And as you probably know, we're running this as a live stream to YouTube and also via Zoom. So if you have questions, pop those in the chat. We'll do our best. Same with you on YouTube. You can pop your questions into the chat as well. Okay, it's very much my pleasure to hand the microphone over to Concordia Public Scholar and one of our hosts for today, Richy Srirachanikorn. Over to you.
Take two.
Take two.
For over some water damage in the hull. Stop snoring on the intercom. Sorry, buddy. Has anyone ever heard of the land Atlantis? Atlantis. Submerged, mythical. A sense of nostalgia. A land forgotten, unrealized, mythologized, yet always somehow tugging on the strings of exploration, discovery, and even progress. Folks like Stockton Rush aren't alone in their endeavors to find and explore the deepest corners of our seas. Neither are Elon Musk and the types who want to explore and continue the space race craze since the 60s, Sputnik, etc. Why is it that nostalgia, something colloquially we tie to the past, things that are sort of mundane, social things, close things, objects you wear, the scents you breathe, the food you taste, something tied so close can be used to motivate, to galvanize, to mythologize a mission for something afar, something yet to come, something so deep, inherent in all of us. Why is something tied to the past sold as a mission for progress? You can't deny the allure for discovering Atlantis, bringing back the Titanic, right? That has that nostalgic scent to it. That Jack and Rose were there, right? I want to see that boardwalk up again. I want to see what those Atlantites felt. What was their sort of pyramids, for example? What would life be like on Mars, right? I'd love to tell my grandchildren about it. It's an interesting thing. When we try to make sense of nostalgia beyond our close bodies, our close ways of engaging with it, there's a lot of moving parts, social narratives, institutions, promises that have yet to be made and even kept. So in this panel, Nostalgia, the Sixth Sense, we go beyond the canonical Western Five, right? We ask whether or not nostalgia is perhaps more close or not for scholars here as an assemblage, a living assemblage, a toolkit, right? A sort of frying pot with all our ingredients that tries to sustain and cook or burn what it is that we're trying to promise, trying to get to. Nostalgia takes a collective effort too, as you'll see from some of my panels. It's not just an individual's motivation, but the agreement of a larger collective to make that promise come true eventually. Restorative nostalgia, Belle Epoque, Sarah-Ganzon. Anyway, keep that in mind, nostalgia beyond your closeness, beyond the five senses, what it is that we do or we believe and internalize that makes something sold and told to us as a nostalgic mission or a nostalgic object when it clearly isn't as is. I'll just hand it over to Ruth Webber-Juggoo, who will be moderating the second panel. Over to you, Ruth.
Thanks, Richy. So yeah, as Richie was saying, this is the second panel and it's called The Sixth Sense. So the panelists are looking at sensorial experiences of nostalgia. And so we have three panelists. And our first panelist is Dr. Tom van Hout, Associate Director from Tilbury University in the Netherlands. Then we have Diego Barajas, PhD candidate in Audiovisual Arts and Media Studies at Tallinn University in Estonia. And then we have Leo Litke, bachelor student in Communication Studies here at Concordia. So each panelist will have 15 minutes, and then we'll have a question period for 15 minutes at the end. So yeah, feel free to post your questions online if you have more questions.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's really great to be participating in this symposium about nostalgia. Bit sad that I couldn't be there personally because I really wanted to go and visit the university and the city and be there the whole time. But well, happy that I am able to do it virtually. I'm gonna be talking about Chronotypes of Nostalgia, which is a site-specific field project that it is part of my artistic research at Tallinn University. It's as well my personal attempt to reimagining cinema, as well as an exercise of belonging here in Estonia, since I am originally from Colombia and I've been living here for about 7 years. It's kind of my new place, so it's as at the same time an exercise of belonging. But I would like to start by talking about the chronotypes concept. As you can imagine, it's a compound word from Greek words chrono, times, and topes, place. So basically, it's the conjunction, the time and space together. And I was really interested not only in the possibilities for the narrative that Bakhtin was already pointing out when he came with this idea, but also about the possibilities of playing with the film itself as something that can be rethink from this time-space experience. The second part is nostalgia, of course, and I would like to explain a little bit where I am standing in terms of nostalgia, since nostalgia is such a rich and complex concept. I would like to say that I am definitely on the reflective nostalgia. That is the nostalgia that deals with the individual experience, oftenly of time, of passing of time. And I am definitely connected to the this project is connected to the attempt of exploring how the from the personal side nostalgia can be experienced, but also I'm trying to explore the materiality of nostalgia, how an object, or in this case a building, can trigger nostalgia and can be like a powerful initiator of a nostalgic experience. And also at the same time, I'm very interested in the possibilities of nostalgia and how it can be something speculative, that it's more definitely about the future than the past, that it's about what we imagine we can be, and less about what we were. In that sense, I was trying to, or that this is my attempt as well. As I was mentioning the word belonging, it's my attempt to create a nostalgia that is able to connect people, and that instead of dividing us, it's able to put us together, to make us understand each other, and to make us recognize through that experience of nostalgia. On the other hand, there is the site-specific narrative film idea. I think I'm taking from the art an old concept of the site-specific, and I am basically bringing it into the narrative film. It's not new if you think about the art installations or multiple form of arts, but it's kind of new in the film, in the narrative film. So it's site specific. It's basically being formally determined by its environmental context. And a second idea that it was very important for me was this idea of relocation, which is an idea that Cassetti proposed. That is it's basically about what happened when you take a media that it's maybe created for certain place and you reactivate it and you repurpose this media into a different space. So I was interested in doing a film that was connected with this space and through nostalgia. So a powerful space that creates nostalgia and trying to create a narrative that it is about nostalgia. So there was the place. So the place was probably the most important part in this project. And I am working with a very significant place here in the city of Tallinn. It's called Linnahall. It is a brutalist, massive building that was created for the Olympics of 1980. Olympics were originally in Moscow, but the regatta and other sea activities were happening in the city of Tallinn. So there was a lot of different constructions around the city, and one of those was this multi-purpose building that has like a 5,000 concert hall space in the inside, a huge ice rink, a lot of commercial areas, and a lot of spaces for the people. And this building during 2 decades become like one of probably the most important cultural place in the city. And it became, in a way, like a way to connect Estonia through to the rest of the world. So there were a lot of events happening here, and a lot of people had like great memories about this place. However, after the Soviet Union collapsed, the funding money for this building was over, and keeping it alive was very tricky. So slowly the building was abandoned. And now it's like basically falling into pieces, although there is still kind of an administration there, which is basically one person who's taking care of the building. The building is still there and it's still used by people. And in every season of the year, you can find different visitors still walking around this place. So when I was looking for an object of nostalgia, and my multiple search all over the city, I found this building, and I personally connect a lot with these arcs that are appearing in this image, because somehow it reminds me of my hometown in Colombia. It was exactly one place, exactly attached to certain memories that I have about that place in Colombia. And then I started to think about how nostalgia could make me visible for the people who were here in the city. And also I started to think about how this object, this construction, was probably also generating nostalgia in other people that were not necessarily living in the city of Tallinn, but just visiting. And so I started to basically do a research about this place, reading all I could, visiting quite often the place, walking all the time in the building, and starting to read the files that I could find. And the archive definitely was playing a very important role, because it was through the archive that I was able to understand how important and meaningful was this building for the city of Tallinn in many different ways. No, it was through the archive that also I kind of find the first characters that I was trying to write down. And so from the archive, I started to write down I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of the creation of this film. I started to write down some characters. So my idea was I will have one local character. I found on the archives a little story about an Armenian construction worker that was living for about 3 years working in the construction of this Lina hall and had to leave before it was ready. So that was one of the stories that I wanted to explore. And the third story was about a Colombian migrant, a little bit reflecting my own experience. But as I realized how important this building was, I also realized that it was necessary for me to work with people. So after doing this initial creation, I went into a co-creation process. Also because when you do site-specific work, you are not entering into an empty black space of a cinema, but you are entering into a space that is full of meaning. And I really wanted to explore that with people. So we have a lot of sessions trying to dig into the past memories, but also imagining stories, trying to understand what kind of feelings the different parts of the building was generating to these people. And together we ended up like completing all the stories. Once we have the stories ready, it was time to try to do this very complex translation of a narrative film into an spatial experience. So imagine that we had like a lot of scenes, and then it was how we can connect each scene with a specific place of the building. How the story that we were trying to narrate, it was connected with a little corner, with a hole in the wall, with a footprint that was in the concrete, things like that. So we create like pathways. And this is where I believe that it's definitely different than a narrative filmmaking process, because I had to include the space and the all the possibilities that the space had, that was bringing into the narrative and into the experience. And after that, there was like a more traditional filming process. The film is actually using a lot of archival footage, but also a lot of original footage. So we were shooting some of those memories in Armenia, in Colombia, in Tallinn, in Estonia, and trying to perform those imaginary memories that the building was generating. And finally, after 3 years of work, it was possible to actually bring the project into reality, and do the actual relocation of the film. So we were installing 16 projectors in one big area of the building, with 18 different sound channels, and creating this experience that was like reactive, that you had to walk through the space to start to understand the story, to follow and to discover the different lines of the story and the three characters, and how these three characters were interlaced. So it was possible to do only during 3 nights in September. I was very lucky because it was warm, and that's not very usual here in Estonia. And we had a lot of visitors, and there was like a limited amount of visitors that could attend. So the experience was not going to be like too noisy. And so we had like 6 screenings, and a lot of visitors, locals, and also like tourists, and also people who were more interested in the place itself, or in the film, were visiting the exhibition. So it is an ephemeral cinema, because I think it's impossible to translate it into a regular screen. And it was at the same time a beautiful experience of gathering together, walking in silence, shoulder to shoulder, sometimes the silence and the darkness was giving place for looking at each other, for looking, who else was there. And in a way, that was a little bit what I was trying to do. And I would like to propose, let's say, like a new perspective kind of nostalgia idea, and that's like this idea of nostalgia, like nu as nosotros, as us, and the with this idea of having nostalgia, something that can create bonds and that can help us to create empathy towards fellow humans, as Boehm says. Finally, I would just like to show you a little bit of a video that is part of the exhibition. So here it goes.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Diego.
thank you so much.
Thanks. I can see why having the film live in the hall with your community and all these people there would really enhance this nostalgic sensorial experience. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate that. So I believe we're ready now with Tom, Dr. Tom Van Hout. Thank you for being patient with us and working with us. So if you're ready, I'll pass the screen to you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you and good morning from my home gym in Antwerp. The title of my talk is Remembering Through Motion, Sensory Nostalgia and Lost Futures in Ultracycling. Next slide, please. The paper I'm about to present examines the transcontinental race, commonly abbreviated as the TCR. The TCR is a self-supported ultra-distance cycling event across Europe. It's an annual race in which riders traverse the continent from a fixed starting point to a fixed finish via mandatory checkpoints. Participants have to carry their own equipment, plan their own routes, arrange their own food and sleep, and complete the race without private resupply or dedicated outside assistance such as team supports. In essence, the race foregrounds values like autonomy, equality, and self-reliance as core values. Next slide, please. In earlier work, I conceptualized the TCR as a site of participatory benign surveillance. Every rider is given a GPS device, and then that tracks your location, speed, distance, etc. These race tracking technologies create a shared rhythm of visibility that connects riders, organizers, volunteers, and spectators, hence benign surveillance. However, what I want to explore today is how this surveillance infrastructure intersects and sometimes overlaps with nostalgia. My argument is that ultracycling mobilizes, invokes nostalgia as a sensory and temporal frame of reference, and that this nostalgia operates alongside and sometimes in tension with benign surveillance. Now, to understand this dynamic, we must begin with a broader observation. Next slide, please. And that observation is that cycling culture has long been deeply ingrained with nostalgia. Vintage cycling is a case in point. Events such as L'Eroica in Tuscany require participants to ride pre-bicycles designed before 1987 and wear old-school cycling kits. Steel frames, down-tube shifters, wool jerseys, and gravel roads recreate what organizers describe as a purer form of the sport. The aesthetic is carefully curated, so modern carbon frames and clipless pedals are excluded. And this vintage revival, as we can see in different cultural practices, draws on deeper histories. The Touring Club Italiano, founded in 1894, promoted cycling as a form of civic engagement and national discovery, right? Seeking to make Italy known to the Italians. Contemporary heroic cycling, as it's called, attaches itself to preservationist and often anti-Europeanization sentiments, thus linking nostalgia to cycling's glorious past to broader cultural politics. In these events, nostalgia is very explicit, very on the nose, right? It is aestheticized, regulated, and performed. The past is materially reconstructed. Next slide, please. Ultracycling, and the TCR in particular, takes this nostalgic logic further, but does so in a different register. The TCR does not promote, or excuse me, the TCR does not prohibit modern technology. Instead, it embraces it. Carbon frames, aerodynamic gear, and GPS units are standard. There is no retro aesthetic, yet the event's rhetoric emphasizes sportsmanship, equality, autonomy, and unsupported endeavor. The event website describes a commitment to autonomy and self-reliance and the integrity to uphold the values of equality and fair play. Here, nostalgia shifts from material reconstruction to ethical orientation. What is reclaimed is not the steel bicycle, but the mythical figure of the lone rider, self-sufficient, resilient, navigating vast terrain without assistance. Next slide, please. Now, to make theoretical sense of this form of nostalgia, I draw on Svetlana Boym's well-known distinction between restorative and reflective nostalgia. L'Eroica exemplifies restorative nostalgia. It rebuilds the lost home, the lost nation, reconstructing historical material conditions. The TCR, on the other hand, embodies reflective nostalgia. The TCR does not seek to restore the past. Instead, it celebrates textures of autonomy and immediacy that feel diminished or perhaps even naive or fake in today's digitally saturated media context. And yet, paradoxically, this longing unfolds within a dense surveillance infrastructure. riders know they're being watched, not by a disciplinary authority, but by friends, family, and strangers who care about their process. I recall on my first TCR event back in 2023 that I started receiving messages from friends and family asking, Tom, why are you moving in circles? While at the time I was walking around in a supermarket trying to find resupplies, hence creating circles on the map. Now, as this short anecdote illustrates, the visibility afforded by the race tracking technologies generates effective investments. Spectators refresh maps late at night, online commentary builds and propels narrative arcs, and riders feel accompanied at a distance. So, in other words, surveillance in the TCR is participatory and relational, and it produces a form of care. Now, this relational visibility does not exhaust or define the race experience. Instead, the embodied rhythms of endurance inevitably exceed digital traces and datafication. The GPS dot cannot capture the smell of hot asphalt or your own body odors, the taste of roadside espresso at dawn, or the vibration of handlebars on Albanian goat tracks, or the disorientation and sleep deprivation that comes from cycling long distances. Next slide, please. On the TCR, nostalgia enters through sensory registers. It's a sensory register of, well, it's a multi-sensory register. Smell, touch, sound, and proprioception become frames of reference and defining features of the race experience. Think, for example, about the repetitive clicking of the freewheel on a descent, or how your muscles ache after a long day in the saddle, or the feel of the wind resistance against tired skin. These sensations form what I call a memory archive. They guide you through the experience. It is in these moments that writers, including myself, feel connected to a sort of mythic past of self-reliant travel. And it is here that nostalgia really appears. This is not a historically precise past, but more of an archetype of such past. The explorer, the pilgrim, the long-distance wanderer. Right? This is textbook reflective nostalgia, right? Longing without literal restoration. At the same time, ultracycling, or the experience of ultracycling, unfolds within what Hartmut Rosa has called social acceleration. Late modernity, late capitalism intensifies through speed, technological change, social transformation, and continuous connectivity. The TCR both depends on and suspends this acceleration. GPS satellites and carbon technology enable extreme performance, yet lived time on the bike thickens. Hours stretch into cadence, biological rhythms, heartbeat, hunger, fatigue, you name it, override such notification cycles. Next slide, please. This is where nostalgia and benign surveillance intersect most visibly or most productively. The life tracking map reduces riders to moving points, yet those points always signify vulnerability, exhaustion, and determination. Visibility fosters a form of recognition and care, right? And care sustains that endurance. At the same time, the rider's experience always exceeds what is visible. The nostalgic longing for autonomy persists even as the rider is continuously tracked. So autonomy and surveillance coexist on the TCR. Mark Fisher's 2014 lost concept of lost futures extends and deepens this analysis. He describes a contemporary condition haunted by unrealized possibilities. Ultracycling traverses landscapes marked by infrastructural promise and decline. Think the diversity of motorways, different forms of tarmac, gravel roads, rural villages, industrial remnants, border crossings. The act of crossing Europe or the USA by bike can evoke a vision of continental coherence and mobility that feels increasingly fragile amid political fragmentation and ecological crisis. The TCR thus mobilizes nostalgia not only for a sporting past, but for collective imaginaries, right? Mobility as a freedom, as a value, endurance as a virtue, Europe as a traversable unity. Next slide, please. And here the benign surveillance framework matters. The race experience reorganizes visibility and care across borders. Riders are tracked across nations. Spectators from different countries followed shared maps. On some occasions, people even walked up to us or ran out of their homes and yelled our names in a very strange form of recognition and care, right? A distributed public forms around the moving dot. In this sense, surveillance infrastructure paradoxically reanimates a fragile sense of European connectedness. I'm reminded by what Sarah Ahmed wrote about how emotions orient bodies towards certain horizons. Nostalgia in ultracycling orients riders towards tactile surfaces, gradients, bodily limits, and border crossings. Surveillance orients them towards audiences and recognition. Together, these orientations produce a layered temporal experience, intensely present, yet saturated with longing and small creature comforts. Importantly, this nostalgia is not marketed explicitly, as in Leroyka. There are no woolen jerseys mandated by the regulation. Instead, nostalgia is embedded in the rhetoric of autonomy and unsupported effort. It is ethical rather than aesthetic. Ultracycling radicalizes cycling culture's nostalgic impulse while displacing or backgrounding its visible markers. And this is what I describe as remembering through motion. Nostalgia unfolds in pedaling itself. The circular motion of the cranks mirrors the cyclical structure of longing, a return without restoration. The rider moves forward while sensing continuity with imagined predecessors and camaraderie with fellow adventurers. Next slide, please. Yet this practice is not simply resistance. Endurance culture can align with neoliberal values of resilience and self-optimization. Surveillance infrastructures can normalize constant visibility. The TCR therefore exemplifies ambivalence rather than escape. What it offers is intensified perception of temporal tension. Within the race, we exhibit or we inhabit acceleration and its suspension simultaneously. One is tracked globally, yet immersed locally. And in this layered condition, nostalgia becomes diagnostic. It reveals what feels lost: slowlands, coherence, tactile immediacy, without pretending to restore it. In sum, cycling culture has long cultivated explicit nostalgia, from vintage steel frames to heroic gravel roads in Tuscany. The TCR extends this tradition but transforms it. It abandons overt retroaesthetics while preserving an ethical imagery of autonomy and endurance. It is in this dense intersection of surveillance, care, and endurance that we begin to understand how contemporary subjects negotiate acceleration, not by rejecting it outright, but by riding through it, sensing its limits, and briefly imagining it otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tom Van Hout. That was really interesting and really powerful. Seeing the map and the distance of ultracycling that you traversed is impressive, and I can understand why all of the senses become heightened in that experience. So thank you for that. I would like to invite Leo Litke to prepare the next presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Leo Litke. I am a bachelor's student in Communication and Cultural Studies here at Concordia, and I will be presenting on Notes of Nostalgia, the framing of scent, memory, and meaning-making in fragrance marketing. All right. So, basically underlined in all aspects of contemporary fragrance production is memory. It's found in the creation, the advertisement, and the consumption of fragrance. Various examples here. But first, I think it helps to think of perfume and its intersections with being considered art. So thinking of perfume and fragrance as art allows us to kind of compare it with how nostalgia is used in other forms of artistic practice, as well as the creation and the consumption of this. There's a really, really interesting text by Larry Scheiner where he outlines various considerations for perfumery as art. He draws the distinction between art and design, as well as outlines various case studies. So he approaches it in different ways that art is defined, and basically finds that art or fragrance can be art but isn't inherently so. So he looks at a whole bunch of different things, including an art exhibit where there was perfume that was put in a gallery and where people were invited to come and come and smell it, as well as commissioned perfumes, commercial perfumes, etc. The first way that nostalgia works with perfume as functioning as inspiration, if you look at any range of different perfume house websites, you will see in the descriptions of a lot of scents, this is an ode to blank, this is our homage to blank. And basically, in this way, nostalgia functions to give perfumers the inspiration to make scents. This comes in a few different ways. So the first is the imitation of personal memories of like a real object that the perfumer has smelled and is trying to recreate. This example is Sweet for Well from a brand called Stranger's Perfumery, where it is trying to replicate a very specific dessert that the perfumer has enjoyed. Another way that this can work is the recreation of personal memories, where there isn't a one-to-one actual scent that the person is trying to create, but rather an essence or an idea of their experiences. Side note on this, as was mentioned in the keynote, there is really, really rampant and often uncriticized Orientalism in fragrance. The category Oriental is still used by many different houses and many different categorizing websites. There's a lot of research on this, and it is too complex to get into, but I wanted to mention it. Because this ties into the kind of more constructed memories where perfumers will make a fragrance based on something that they have not experienced, but as how they would imagine it to have been. So this is an example that I wanted to look at. It is called Caravanserai by Nikolai Parfumer Creator. It is based off of the caravanserai, which were structures that were found along the Silk Road where travelers could stop, rest, feed their horses, etc. That's an actual caravanserai. Obviously, the perfumer didn't visit this as it was, so this is her interpretation of what she imagines it would have smelled like. Beyond this, side note, there is also a variation on the constructed memories where it's a constructed collective memory, where it's kind of in between the created memories and the personal ones. So this is so created memories are where a perfumer will basically create an entire idea or an event that hasn't happened completely from scratch. Toscafat is a really, really good example of this because basically all of their scents are extremely detailed and have very elaborate backstories that are found on all of the marketing materials. So here you can see that it starts with today I remembered, and this is true for all of them, with varying degrees of detail. They also refer to memory very extensively, again, in their copy they view perfumes as memory, and they use this like created nostalgia to kind of see this through. Nostalgia is also very, very constantly used in marketing. Even just in all of these, you can see that there is explicit reference to memory. I have seen critiques of perfume brands referencing memory as seeming kind of like vague or just not very specific, which I think is a very fair critique, but it is very, very consistent. And this is also because the way that perfume marketing works inherently relies on memory. So the marketing of fragrance, because fragrance cannot be smelled through time and space in the same way that a visual product can be displayed, fundamentally relies on the nostalgia and the memory of the consumer to recall what it is that the list that they are given of materials actually smells like. So you see rain accord, you think, what does rain smell like? Obviously this is subjective, but this is how it works. Notes themselves are constructed. It is rare, it's still, they're still used, but the actual raw materials of various scents are not very commonly used anymore, mostly just for feasibility. They're often a lot more unstable and don't last as long. So almost all of the actual notes that you're seeing are aromachemical reconstructions of what it is that this thing smells like. There is really, really extensive research on the emotional relation of memory and scent. Again, I am not in psychology, and there is just a lot to unpack there. But there is very, very thorough research on how important memory is to scent. So the note system can be approached in a few different ways. I have the semiotics triangle because it's functionally the same thing of you see what the advertiser is putting, you remember what it smells like, and then based on that you construct an idea of what you think the perfume will smell like. So here we have a more contemporary version with Dead Cool, and as well as a more historical version with the Histoire de Parfum. So moving on to nostalgia marketing, which is a very specific kind of marketing that relies on consumer nostalgia of an idealized past. I have found 1740 by Histoire de Parfum as an example of this. So this perfume house has a variety of different fragrances that are named after years. Most of them are named after the birth year of a historical figure. Jules Verne is an example of this. However, 1740 is inspired by the Age of Enlightenment. So the way that this uses nostalgia marketing is it relies on an idealized construction of what we think the Enlightenment era would have smelled like or might have smelled like. This can also be found in Denam's Memories of Japan. Denam is an interesting case because they started with a series on Vietnam, which is where the company's founder's family is from, and then they've moved on to Japan and to now China. So it's a mix of personal and created or constructed nostalgia. In particular, Memories of Japan is interesting because they include a lot of very contemporary scents, such as matcha soft serve, which evidently didn't exist at the same time as the samurai, but they also do include more historical-based or inspired fragrances. Further with Denam, in their first series, they have a They have a series of scents that are inspired by various elements of life in Vietnam, including one that was in the garden, which is directly attributed to the founder's grandmother. So this is an example of nostalgia being used in marketing without explicitly engaging in nostalgia marketing, because this is a personal memory and not a more collective or broad one. In addition, I thought it was really, really interesting. There is a really great review of the literature on nostalgia marketing by Milieux Institute that really flagged some interesting things, including that the USA and France are the top 2 countries that are producing nostalgia marketing, which, of course, these are also 2 companies that make a lot of perfumes. In addition to that, there's kind of the tie to various social theories, including the relation between the consumer behavior in terms of what consumers are interested in drawing to or are drawn to, as well as the brand behavior of what it is that they are then putting out in response. Obviously, this comes with some critique of nostalgia marketing, of it risking being oversimplified and not very in depth or used very critically, but I think that it's still a very interesting thing to look at here. Last I was looking to nostalgia in consumption. So the example of this that I chose was Steamed Rainbow by DS and Durga. I will get into this in a bit, but I really appreciated the review of this as you're in the backyard playing on the slip and slide while your parents are getting a divorce. So online platforms have really, really changed the way that people engage with fragrance and fragrance reviews and consuming fragrance. These are taken from a platform called Fragrantica, which generates with AI a pros and cons list of the fragrances based on the reviews that users upload. And I thought that it was really unusual that deeply nostalgic is used as the second descriptor. Often for these, especially for scents that are a lot more like designer friendly or like mass appealing, you will see things such as comments on the gender associations, how long it lasts, if certain notes are particularly strong or weak. And I thought that nostalgic showing up on there was somewhat uncommon. This is not to say that nostalgia being used in fragrance reviews is common. It's unusual that it's this prevalent. Very frequently on TikTok and Instagram and other social media platforms, users will post reviews that include references to how nostalgic a scent is. And I think we all have scents that are nostalgic to us. One example that I really wish that I could have found to include on this was a TikTok of a girl saying that she wanted to smell like the pink soap in elementary school bathrooms, which is a combination of cherry, almond, and I think apple. But it's this, it shows a broader engagement between the actual perfumers and what they're creating, as well as what consumers associate with nostalgia. These online platforms really do allow users to specifically note and relate nostalgia to scents, as well as to each other and broader experiences. And that is it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Leo. That was really great. That was really interesting. So we've had 3 different papers with a variety of sensorial nostalgic experiences referencing different, nostalgic ways of experiencing nostalgia. Now I'd like to open the floor up to questions or online if anyone has questions they have for the presenters today.
Oh, I see a question here in the space.
Leo, you didn't address it, so maybe you're not looking at that. I'm curious to know when scents are marketed in a very gendered way, like there's cologne and there's perfume. Did you look at that and how nostalgia feeds into however you would position cologne and who might be attracted to cologne versus perfume?
Yeah, that's not something that I actually looked into, mostly because with the scents that I was looking at, they're predominantly niche or more artistic fragrances, just because those are the scents that I find more directly engaged with the kind of like creation or construction of nostalgia. And perfume and cologne actually refer to the concentration of fragrance oil to like a carrier as opposed to the actual gender of the scent. So it's very, very common that for perfumes that are, or for fragrance houses that are trying to market more conceptually like this, instead of looking to present the gender, they're more trying to present the idea. This is not to say that, I mean, obviously gender impacts how perfumes and fragrances are marketed, and will obviously relate to very subjective experiences of nostalgia. But I found that gender here, I think Denam has the descriptor of like more feminine, unisex, more masculine, but a lot of these fragrance houses just don't include any descriptions on gender, and they're all marketed very unisex.
We have another question, and then I believe we'll have time for one more question after this.
All three presentations, there were interesting themes. Most of the contexts were attributing to reflective nostalgia, in my opinion. At least that's the way I saw it. We have to decouple two types of experiences, whether we're speaking about geographic locations where there are commemorations, whether we're speaking about quests or, how do you say, cycling trips that pave over the memories of the past, or whether we recover experiences through through memories of scents that recover in perfume. These all invoke some sort of collectivity, a collective experience. What can you say about the individual experience and the way the memories are retrieved at the individual level, in the sense that there's a correspondence, some sort of mapping? The first two speakers mentioned mappings and how do you say, geolocation as ways of referencing the spatio-temporal setting for people's experiences. But each individual on their level has a different reference, has a different way of conceptualizing that framework. Is it possible to find some sort of segue between the two? Thank you.
Diego or Dr. Van Hout, if you have any comments on that.
Diego, can I go first?
Yes, yes.
Very interesting question, but difficult to answer. I think in part because the individual experience as an ultracyclist is so unpredictable and is all over the map, so to speak, that I think it's difficult to connect both the collective experience and the individual experience. That being said, if we were, for instance, to keep diaries or have a sort of ethnographic tracking of athletes, then I think we could collectively understand how individual experiences of longing, nostalgia, reflective nostalgia come into play. So initially, I would say I see an interesting ethnographic project, but difficult to pull off logistically in the field?
Well, I think in the case of my project, from storytelling and from a narrative point of view, I think we kind of count on the possibility of bridging the individual nostalgia with the collective nostalgia. It's basically a little bit what the attempt of the project that I was doing, trying to create a sense of nostalgia that was possible to share, that was possible to experience as your own nostalgia, kind of experience nostalgia of other as your personal nostalgia through the storytelling and through the experiencing of the space particularly. Yeah, I don't know if that answers concretely the question. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. I think we're out of time for questions, but I'd like to thank the presenters for your fascinating talks, and thank you for sharing. And I think we're at lunchtime now, and I saw pizza coming in, and I think Richy has some more words to say, but soon we'll be eating.
Just another round of applause to everybody. So folks, just as a reminder, if you're here on Zoom, hi, and if you're here in person, this is a symposium. It's not a conference, it's not a colloquium, it's a symposium. Symposiums are meant to be fun, are meant to be in person. You laugh, right? Did you see me this morning? Woo, right? Enjoy yourselves, what you're doing. Again, the entire day is for you to experience how we can make the sensation of nostalgia palpable, productive, collective, right? Something that's so contested and abstract, individual, collective or not, yet we all have a say in it. When you are having lunch now, there's pizzas there's food, there's drinks. I'd like to introduce two special guests, if you come up. Anaïs Gagnon and Marianne Descaries. Just give them a clap. They are two brilliant artists who have their own style of capturing, a particular aesthetic of the past. Behind this curtain, and we encourage you when you have lunch, go over there, line up there, go into our Nostalgia Cafe, sit across either Anaïs or Marianne, and they will sketch a photo of you, capture your nostalgic moment in their own artistic language. Let's see how that goes. Anyway, enjoy lunch and see you soon.
Okay, thank you once again to everyone who presented today. That was wonderful. Thank you to the audience for your questions. We're going to go ahead, close up that live stream. We're going to keep the Zoom open because I believe we have some presentations coming up soon. We hope to see you soon. Take a quick lunch break and we'll call you back when it's time. Thanks so much.